I always thought the key to success was simple: work hard, stay focused, and eventually the universe would reward you. But my story proves that sometimes it's not just about working hard. It's about being in the right place at the right time, taking a huge leap of faith, and knowing when to pivot. It all started when I was in my mid-20s, fresh out of college, and working a boring office job at a tech company. I wasn't doing anything exciting, and I could feel myself falling into the trap of a typical 9-to-5 life that I had always feared. I had big dreams of starting something unique, something that could make a difference. But at that point, all I had was an idea and a growing feeling of dissatisfaction with my day-to-day life. One day, while scrolling through my social media feed, I stumbled upon an article about a new startup that was making waves in the e-commerce space. It was a simple concept: selling unique, customized products to people who were tired of the same old mass-produced items. The idea sparked something in me. I started thinking, why not do this myself? I was so ready to leave my job, but I didn't have the courage just yet. I knew I had to learn more about how people were succeeding in the business world, especially in the e-commerce space. I dove into books, podcasts, blogs, and online courses. That's when I stumbled upon dropshipping. I remember the first time I heard about it. The idea of running an online store without worrying about inventory or upfront costs sounded almost too good to be true. I spent hours researching it, watching YouTube tutorials, and reading success stories from people who had made a decent living with this model. For a while, I thought maybe this was the answer I had been searching for. With no savings and a hefty student loan hanging over my head, I decided to take the plunge. I had the knowledge, and I was willing to take risks. So, after weeks of planning, I quit my job and started my own dropshipping business. It was a bold move, but at that point, it felt like the only way to avoid the slow death of mediocrity. My first few weeks were rough. I remember spending countless nights building my online store, creating product listings, and designing ads. I felt like I was working around the clock, but there was a persistent sense of uncertainty. Would people actually buy what I was selling? Was this really going to work? When my first sale came through, I almost couldn't believe it. It was a small order, but it was proof that there was a market for what I was offering. That feeling of validation was enough to keep me going. I reinvested every cent I made back into marketing and expanding my product line. But as quickly as the orders started coming in, so did the problems. The suppliers I had partnered with didn't always fulfill orders on time, and the shipping costs were higher than expected. For every problem I solved, it seemed like two more popped up. At this point, I was exhausted and starting to feel the pressure. I had already burned through the little savings I had left, and I was deep into credit card debt. There were nights when I would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought about returning to my old job, but something inside me told me to keep pushing. I didn't come this far to turn back now. After several months of struggling, I made a huge decision that would change the trajectory of my business. I decided to pivot. Instead of selling random products through dropshipping, I would narrow my focus and offer products that were both niche and high quality. I started by analyzing customer feedback and identifying products that people actually needed, not just things that seemed like they might sell well. I dug deeper into the data and found a specific market: eco-friendly, sustainable products. People were becoming more conscious of their environmental impact, and I wanted to be part of that movement. I revamped my entire store, bringing in sustainable products that I personally believed in. I started working with suppliers who aligned with my values and were reliable. I rebranded my store, updated my website, and put more effort into content marketing. It wasn't an overnight success, but this time, I felt like I was on the right path. Sales began to grow slowly but steadily. As my business grew, I started to get more creative. I launched social media campaigns, collaborated with eco-influencers, and even started my own blog on sustainability. The more I put myself out there, the more customers connected with my brand. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to host a giveaway in partnership with a well-known eco-friendly brand. The giveaway went viral. In 1 week, my website traffic skyrocketed and sales surged. That's when I knew I had finally found my footing. Over the next couple of years, my business continued to scale. I reinvested everything I earned into hiring a small team, upgrading my website, and expanding my product line. I was living the dream, but it wasn't easy. There were still setbacks. There were days when suppliers let me down, when social media algorithms changed, and when I felt like my efforts weren't paying off. But every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself why I started: to build something I was passionate about, and to prove to myself that I could create success on my own terms. Looking back, I realized that the journey wasn't as linear as I initially thought it would be. The road to success is filled with twists, turns, and unexpected challenges. There were times when I was broke, unsure of how to pay the bills, and questioning whether it was all worth it. But each mistake and failure taught me something new, and every victory, no matter how small, motivated me to keep going. Today, my business is thriving. We've expanded into new markets, and our brand has built a loyal following. I've been able to hire a team of passionate people who believe in the mission. And while I'm proud of what I've accomplished, I know that none of it would have been possible without the risks, the mistakes, and the constant hustle. The biggest lesson I've learned is that success isn't just about hard work. It's about persistence, adaptability, and believing in yourself when no one else does. Would I have taken the leap if I knew how tough it would be? Honestly, probably not. But looking back, I wouldn't trade the struggle for anything. It shaped who I am today. So, if you're out there, stuck in a rut, unsure whether you should take that leap, do it. Take the risk, learn from your failures, and keep going. You might just surprise yourself. And remember, no one sees the late nights, the uncertainty, and the sacrifices it takes to get there. But you'll know. And that's what matters. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. For as long as I can remember, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. From selling lemonade in my front yard as a kid to running small online side hustles in my teens, I was constantly looking for ways to make money outside of the traditional 9 to 5 grind. But my journey to creating a successful business wasn't a straight path. It was filled with countless failures, learning experiences, and moments where I thought about giving up. I want to share my story to show that even though it may take time, hard work, and persistence, success is possible. It all began a few years ago when I was working a standard office job. I had a decent salary, good benefits, and an easy routine. On the surface, everything seemed fine. But deep down, I knew something was missing. I felt unfulfilled. I had this burning desire to be my own boss and build something that could potentially change my life. I wanted the freedom that came with being in control of my own time and income. One night, after scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon an ad for an online course on starting an e-commerce business. It piqued my interest because it sounded like a low-risk way to start a business, no need for upfront inventory, and the ability to work from anywhere. I had no experience in e-commerce, but I figured it was worth a shot. So, I took the plunge and signed up for the course. The course was basic, but it gave me the knowledge to start my own online store. I chose to focus on a niche I was passionate about, pet products. I had grown up with dogs, and I knew how much people love to spoil their pets. I thought there was a huge potential market there. But despite my enthusiasm, things didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. My first attempt at dropshipping was a complete disaster. I set up my website, sourced products, and launched my first ad campaign on Facebook. At first, I was excited, but then reality hit. I got 0 sales. I had spent hours setting everything up, only to be met with complete silence. My ads were getting impressions, but no clicks or conversions. I was frustrated. How could something that seemed so easy be so difficult? But I didn't give up. I spent the next few weeks researching what went wrong. I watched tutorials, read blog posts, and joined online communities of other entrepreneurs who had gone through the same struggles. I learned that I needed to refine my product selection, improve my website design, and work on creating more targeted ads. It wasn't enough to just slap some products on a website and expect people to buy them. I had to build a brand that resonated with my audience and offered real value. So, I went back to the drawing board. I spent days redesigning my website to make it more user-friendly and visually appealing. I focused on narrowing down my product selection to only the most unique and high-quality pet items. I started testing different ad copy and targeting options to see what would resonate with my audience. Slowly but surely, I began to see small improvements. A few sales trickled in. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that I was on the right track. As my business started to gain traction, I began to feel more confident. I reinvested the money I made into scaling my business. I experimented with new marketing strategies, expanded my product line, and worked on improving my customer service. I also spent time learning about SEO and email marketing, two areas I had completely overlooked in the beginning. But, of course, there were more hurdles to overcome. At one point, I had an issue with a supplier who was consistently late with deliveries. This caused some of my customers to receive their orders weeks after they had made a purchase. I had to eat the cost of those orders to keep my customers happy, and that took a toll on my bottom line. There were other challenges, too, like dealing with chargebacks, negative reviews, and the ever-changing landscape of Facebook advertising. But through it all, I kept pushing forward. Over time, my store began to grow, and I started to see more consistent sales. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service and outsource some of the day-to-day tasks so I could focus on scaling the business. I invested more into paid ads and worked on creating a more robust brand identity. My business wasn't a huge success overnight, but it was finally sustainable. I had turned my side hustle into a full-time income, and that felt like a huge accomplishment. The real turning point came when I started focusing on building a community around my brand. Instead of just selling products, I worked on creating content that would engage my audience. I shared pet care tips, behind-the-scenes looks at how my business worked, and stories about my own pets. I began to connect with customers on a deeper level, and this loyalty translated into more sales. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about creating something meaningful that people were genuinely excited about. By the end of my first year, my business had grown to the point where I was making more money than I had in my office job. I felt like I had finally broken free from the traditional work grind. But it wasn't just the money that mattered, it was the lifestyle that came with it. I had the freedom to work from anywhere, whether that was my home office or a coffee shop in a different city. I could set my own hours and spend more time doing the things I loved, like traveling and spending time with my family. It's been a few years since I made the decision to leave my job, and I can honestly say it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I've expanded my business to include multiple product lines, and I've started helping other people who want to get into e-commerce. I even launched a YouTube channel where I share my experiences and lessons learned along the way. If I could give advice to someone just starting out, it would be this: don't expect overnight success. Entrepreneurship is hard, and it takes time to see results. But if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, you can achieve things that you never thought possible. The journey is never easy, but the rewards are worth it. I was 28, broke, and living with my parents when I first decided to go all in on my dream of owning a successful business. At the time, I was working a dead-end job as a retail associate, barely scraping by. Every day felt like I was just going through the motions, living in autopilot mode. I had this gnawing feeling that I was capable of more, but I had no idea how to make it happen. I had always been interested in the tech world, specifically in developing apps. I had a passion for problem solving and figuring out how things worked, but I had zero formal education in programming. In fact, I didn't even know how to code. But I had a vision. I was convinced that there had to be a way to create a simple app that would solve a problem people faced every day. The catch was, I had no money to get started. I started with a simple idea, an app that would help people find parking spots in crowded city areas. Anyone who has ever driven in a busy city knows how frustrating it can be to find a parking space. I thought, what if I could create something that allowed drivers to track available parking spaces in real time? Now, this was back in 2015, and there were a few parking apps out there, but they didn't do what I envisioned. They were clunky, hard to navigate, and didn't provide real-time data. So, I figured, why not improve on that? Why not build something better? The problem was, I had zero coding experience. So, I began to educate myself. I watched YouTube tutorials, read countless articles, and even joined online coding communities to learn everything I could. It was exhausting, but I was determined. Every night, after work, I'd sit in front of my laptop and code, learning one line at a time. 6 months went by, and I still didn't have a working prototype. But I wasn't discouraged. I knew it would take time. Finally, after a year of learning and experimenting, I was able to build the basic version of the app one had envisioned. But that's when the real struggle began. I had no money to hire a team. I couldn't afford to pay for development tools or marketing. The only thing I had going for me was my drive and my will to succeed. So, I did what any desperate entrepreneur would do. I bootstrapped everything. I spent every penny I had on a simple website and a basic marketing campaign. I reached out to local businesses in my city, offering them free trials of the app in exchange for feedback. I posted on Reddit, Facebook groups, and anywhere I could think of to get the word out. I even reached out to parking garages, offering them the chance to list their spots on my app. At first, no one cared. They didn't understand the value, and honestly, I didn't blame them. But I kept pushing. One day, I received an email from a parking garage owner who wanted to give my app a try. He said he'd been reading about the growth of parking apps and was intrigued by the concept. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep me going. I worked tirelessly to get that garage on board, adding their parking spaces to the app and tweaking the interface based on their feedback. Months passed, and the app started to grow, albeit slowly. I added more and more locations, improved the functionality, and kept reaching out to new businesses. But it wasn't until I ran into another entrepreneur who had been through similar struggles that things truly started to turn around. This guy, let's call him Mark, had been in the tech industry for years and had launched several successful startups. I met him at a local networking event, and after chatting for a bit, I mentioned my app. He was intrigued, but quickly pointed out several flaws in my approach. He told me that my app wasn't scalable and that I needed to think bigger. He asked me questions that I had never even considered before. How are you going to monetize this app? What's your long-term plan? Who's your target audience? I realized then that I had been too focused on the day-to-day details and had failed to develop a solid business strategy. Mark's advice was a wake-up call. Over the next few weeks, we continued to talk, and he offered valuable insights into growing a tech business. He also introduced me to a few investors who were interested in supporting promising startups. I had to decide whether I was ready to go all in, to take the leap and turn my side project into a real business. I was terrified. The idea of taking on investors and possibly failing was daunting. But after months of struggling on my own, I knew that I couldn't do it alone anymore. I needed help, and this could be my shot. I pitched my app to the investors, and after several tense meetings, they agreed to back me. With their support, I was able to hire a team of developers and designers, drastically improving the app's functionality and user experience. We revamped the interface, added new features like GPS integration, and developed a payment system for users to book parking spots in advance. The improvements paid off. Within a few months, the app's user base skyrocketed. Cities all over the country started signing up, and we expanded to multiple locations, including airports, malls, and stadiums. I still remember the first time I saw a user book a parking spot through the app. It felt surreal. But even as the app grew, I had to stay humble. There were plenty of challenges ahead. Competitors started to emerge, and we faced some stiff competition from bigger companies with more resources. But by then, we had established a loyal user base, and I knew that if we kept innovating and focusing on our customers, we could stay ahead. Fast forward to today, and my app is a multi-million-dollar business with over 5 million active users. We've raised several rounds of funding, expanded into international markets, and partnered with major players in the parking and transportation industries. It's been a crazy ride, but I wouldn't change a thing. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From being broke and living with my parents to running a successful startup, I've learned that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of relentless hard work, a willingness to learn from your mistakes, and the courage to take risks. But most importantly, it's about never giving up on your vision, no matter how impossible it seems. So, to anyone reading this who feels stuck, who feels like their dreams are out of reach, just remember, the journey may be long, and the road may be tough, but if you keep pushing forward, you can achieve things you never thought possible. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I always thought the people who ran businesses were born with some sort of special gift, some innate ability to turn ideas into gold. I was just a regular guy, working a 9-to-5 job, trying to make ends meet, like most people. I'd heard all the stories about the Steve Jobs and Elon Musks of the world, and while I admired them, I didn't think I'd ever be one of those people. But life has a funny way of surprising you. It all started about 4 years ago. I was working a mundane office job, doing marketing for a tech company. It wasn't bad, but it was far from exciting. I'd spend my days in front of a computer, working on projects I didn't care about for people I didn't know. Sure, the pay was decent, but I had no passion for the work. I would often daydream about doing something on my own, something that was truly mine. But I always pushed those thoughts away, thinking it was too risky, too complicated. I didn't have the skills, the money, or the connections to start a business. Or so I thought. One day, during a routine Monday morning, I found myself listening to a podcast while driving to work. The episode was about entrepreneurship, and I found myself captivated by the story of a man who had started his own online business with almost no money. He talked about how he struggled at first, how he failed numerous times, but kept pushing forward. He made it sound so simple, almost like anyone could do it. I went home that evening and found myself Googling how to start an online business. I spent hours reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and listening to more podcasts. The idea of building something from the ground up, having the freedom to work on my own terms, and controlling my own destiny began to take root in my mind. I was still skeptical, after all. I didn't have much business experience, and I definitely wasn't a tech genius. But the more I researched, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was something I could do. It wasn't long before I stumbled across dropshipping. I had heard the term before, but I didn't really know what it meant. In a nutshell, dropshipping allows you to sell products online without holding inventory. When a customer buys something from your store, the supplier ships it directly to them. No need to worry about stocking products or dealing with shipping logistics. It sounded too good to be true, but I figured it was a low-risk way to get started. I took the plunge. I spent hours building a basic Shopify store. I picked a niche, fitness products, since I'd always been into fitness myself, and began searching for suppliers. I had no clue what I was doing, but I was determined to figure it out. I designed my website, set up some Facebook ads, and crossed my fingers. At first, nothing happened. No sales, no clicks, nothing. I felt defeated. Maybe this wasn't for me. Maybe I was just another person who was too late to the game. But I didn't give up. I started tweaking things. I changed my ad copy, reworked my product descriptions, and even adjusted my website's layout. Slowly, the clicks started coming in, but still no sales. I wasn't giving up yet, but I was getting frustrated. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got my first sale. It wasn't much, just a single order for a pair of resistance bands, but it felt like a huge victory. I had done it. I had made my first dollar online. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to spark something inside me. I was on the right track. I continued to improve my website and ads. I learned more about SEO, email marketing, and customer service. The sales started coming in slowly but surely. Nothing crazy at first, but enough to keep me motivated. Every sale felt like a win, a small step closer to my dream of running a successful business. But things weren't always smooth sailing. Like most entrepreneurs, I faced plenty of setbacks. At one point, my supplier shipped the wrong product to a customer, and I had to deal with a refund and an angry email. Another time, I ran an ad campaign that lost me hundreds of dollars. There were days when I seriously doubted myself. Was I cut out for this? Was it worth it? But each failure taught me something new. I learned to improve my communication with suppliers, I figured out how to run more targeted ads, and I got better at managing customer expectations. Slowly but surely, my business began to grow. Fast forward to a year later, and I was making enough money from my side business that I was able to quit my full-time job. It wasn't an easy decision. I had the safety of a steady paycheck, health benefits, and a career path, but I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore the opportunity in front of me. I wasn't ready to jump into this full-time, but I felt like I had to give it a shot. When I went full-time, things started to change. I could devote all my time to my business. I focused on scaling it, learning everything I could about growing an online store. I expanded my product range, improved my website's user experience, and fine-tuned my marketing efforts. The more effort I put in, the more sales I made. Within a few months, my income from the business was surpassing what I was making at my old job. But it wasn't just the money that kept me going, it was the freedom. I was no longer stuck in a cubicle following someone else's rules. I could travel, work from home, and make my own schedule. I was in control of my life for the first time. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were still challenges. Running a business is hard work, and there were times when I felt overwhelmed. But the key was learning to handle failure, to embrace the process, and to keep moving forward. Looking back now, I can't believe how far I've come. I started with nothing, no experience, no money, and no clue what I was doing. But I took a chance on myself, and it paid off. My business has grown into something I'm incredibly proud of, and I've even started mentoring others who want to get started in e-commerce. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that anyone can be an entrepreneur. You don't need to be some genius or born with a special gift. You just need determination, a willingness to learn, and the ability to keep going when things get tough. Success doesn't happen overnight, But with enough persistence and grit, it's possible. It was 2015 when I first realized that my life was about to change forever. I was working a 9-to-5 job at a mid-sized tech company in San Francisco, making a comfortable living but feeling increasingly dissatisfied with the direction of my career. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to work, do the usual tasks, and come home only to do it all over again the next day. I felt like I was running on a hamster wheel, stuck in a routine that seemed to be getting me nowhere. But one thing kept nagging at me: entrepreneurship. I had always been passionate about technology and innovation, and deep down, I knew I had an idea that could make a difference. I just didn't know how to get started. The thought of quitting my stable job to chase an uncertain dream was terrifying, but the pull of building something from the ground up was stronger than the fear. So, after a lot of sleepless nights and internal debates, I made the bold decision to leave my job and dive headfirst into the world of startups. The first step was deciding on the business idea. It was something I had been tinkering with for years, an app that could help people with chronic pain track their symptoms, connect with doctors, and find personalized treatment options. Chronic pain was something that affected millions of people, and there was a huge gap in the market for a comprehensive, user-friendly solution. I had done some market research, talked to potential users, and even developed a prototype in my spare time. It felt like the perfect fit. But as soon as I made the leap, I quickly realized that being an entrepreneur was nothing like I had imagined. The initial excitement of building my own company quickly turned into a whirlwind of sleepless nights, financial stress, and countless challenges I wasn't prepared for. I didn't have a co-founder or a big investment to back me up, just a few $1,000s in savings, a burning desire to succeed, and a lot of determination. I started by building the app on my own. I spent hours coding, designing, and tweaking the user interface. I wanted everything to be perfect, but the more I worked, the more I realized that perfection was an illusion. There were bugs, glitches, and unforeseen technical issues that I couldn't seem to fix. The frustration was overwhelming at times, but I kept pushing through, determined not to give up. Meanwhile, I had to figure out how to fund my venture. I had no experience with fundraising, so I began reaching out to investors, applying for grants, and looking for any opportunity to get some capital. Most of the time, I was met with rejection. The investors I approached were skeptical of a solo founder with no track record, and my pitches often fell flat. It felt like every door I knocked on was slammed in my face. After months of struggling, I decided to pivot. I knew I had a good product, but I needed to find a way to get it into the hands of users. I reached out to a few influencers in the health and wellness space and offered them free access to my app in exchange for honest feedback and promotion. To my surprise, several of them agreed, and their endorsements gave me the credibility I desperately needed. Slowly but surely, word started to spread, and my user base began to grow. But the real breakthrough came when I received a message from a healthcare startup that had been following my progress. They were interested in partnering with me to integrate my app into their platform, which already had a large user base. It was a dream come true. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for. We negotiated a deal, and within a few months, my app was integrated into their system, giving me access to thousands of new users almost overnight. The partnership was a game changer. Not only did it bring in more users, but it also provided the financial stability I needed to continue growing the business. I hired a small team of developers and marketers, and we began working on improving the app and adding new features. The product evolved rapidly, and we began attracting more attention from investors and industry leaders. But just as things were starting to look up, disaster struck. A competitor with a much larger budget and a similar idea launched a rival app. They had the marketing muscle and resources to dominate the space, and for a brief moment, I thought it was all over. I had poured my heart and soul into this business, and now it seemed like everything I had worked for was being overshadowed by a bigger, better-funded company. But instead of giving up, I decided to fight back. I focused on what made my app unique, its personalized approach to chronic pain management, and doubled down on user engagement. We started offering more educational content, personalized treatment plans, and a stronger support system for users. We also reached out to doctors and healthcare providers to get their buy-in, creating a network of professionals who could endorse and recommend the app. Gradually, our user base grew, and the quality of our product began to speak for itself. Word-of-mouth referrals became our most powerful marketing tool, and our ratings and reviews on app stores skyrocketed. We eventually raised a new round of funding, which allowed us to expand our team, enhance our features, and scale the business even further. Now, fast forward to 2025. My company has grown beyond what I ever imagined, and I'm fortunate enough to employ a talented team of people who are just as passionate about the mission as I am. We've expanded our product offerings to include additional health tools, and we've partnered with major healthcare providers to offer our services to millions of users worldwide. Looking back, I can't help but feel grateful for the journey. It's been an incredibly difficult and often lonely road, but every setback, every failure, and every challenge has made me stronger. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, but it has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from embracing it, learning from it, and continuing to push forward, no matter what. To anyone out there thinking of starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time, and there will always be obstacles in your way. But if you believe in your idea, if you're willing to work harder than you ever thought possible, and if you're not afraid to fail, then you can build something amazing. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Now, as I sit in my office looking at the future of my company, I can't help but feel a sense of pride. I didn't just build an app. I built something that's changing lives. And that's something no paycheck or corporate job could ever offer. When I started my business, I had nothing but an idea and a pile of student debt. I had just graduated college, unsure of what I was going to do, but I knew that I didn't want to end up in a 9-to-5 job like everyone else I saw around me. Everyone seemed so sure about their next steps, working at finance firms, marketing agencies, or tech startups, but I just felt lost. I always had an entrepreneurial spark in me, even though I hadn't fully realized it yet. I spent hours reading about people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and Oprah, people who had built incredible empires from nothing. And while their stories inspired me, they also intimidated me. I couldn't help but think, how am I supposed to do something like that? One night, sitting in my cramped apartment eating ramen for the third time that week, I stumbled upon an idea. I'd been an avid gamer since I was a kid, and during one of my late-night sessions, I realized there was a huge market for custom-designed gaming accessories, specifically high-quality custom controllers that could be tailored to each gamer's needs. Everyone in the gaming community always complained about the lack of personalized gear, and most products available were either too expensive or lacked the customization options they craved. I thought, why not combine my love for gaming with a business? I didn't know much about building a business, but I knew that if I could create something gamers would love, I might be able to turn it into a full-time gig. I had some experience with 3D design and CAD, thanks to a couple of courses I took in college, and I was decent with tech, so I thought I could make it work. The first hurdle was money. I had none. My savings were essentially non-existent, and I didn't want to ask my parents for a loan. But I was determined. So, I did what any broke college graduate would do. I started hustling. I picked up freelance gigs doing 3D design work, building websites, and even doing odd jobs for neighbors. I saved every penny I could, and after months of scraping by, I finally had enough to buy the basic equipment I'd need to start prototyping the controllers. I didn't know how to make controllers, of course. I had no formal training in product manufacturing, but I figured the first step was just getting a working prototype, something that looked like a real controller and felt comfortable in the hand. I started by purchasing a bunch of cheap, standard controllers off the shelf, then tearing them apart and rebuilding them with different components, things like custom grips, buttons, and triggers. At first, the results were terrible. The controllers barely worked, and they were clunky. But every failure taught me something new. I watched countless YouTube tutorials on product design, scoured forums for advice, and reached out to engineers who might be able to help. Slowly but surely, I improved my design. It took months of trial and error, but eventually, I had a product I was proud of, a high-quality, customizable gaming controller that didn't break the bank. The next challenge was marketing. I knew no one in the gaming industry, and I didn't have any connections. But I knew that the power of social media could help me reach potential customers. So, I started posting about my progress on Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit, showcasing my prototypes, getting feedback, and sharing my journey. The response was overwhelming. Gamers were excited about the idea of customizing their controllers and eager to see more. I decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign to fund the first production run of my controllers. I set a modest goal, $10,000, which seemed like a huge stretch at the time, but it was the amount I thought I'd need to cover materials, manufacturing, and shipping. To my surprise, the campaign quickly gained traction. I leveraged every bit of the marketing I had done on social media and reached out to influencers in the gaming community to promote my project. After a month, I had raised $50,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give me the funds to produce my first batch of controllers and cover my overhead costs. I couldn't believe it. I went from being broke with a barely working prototype to running a small business with actual funding and a customer base. It felt like a dream. The real work started when I received the first batch of controllers. There were a few hiccups. Some of the controllers had defects, and I had to scramble to get them replaced. But once they started going out to backers, the feedback was incredible. People loved the product, and I had an entire community of gamers who were excited to see the brand grow. Over the next year, I reinvested every dollar I made into the business. I upgraded my equipment, improved my designs, and started hiring a small team to help with production and customer service. Sales skyrocketed, and soon enough, I was able to quit my freelance work entirely and focus on the business full-time. But success wasn't just about making money. It was about building something that I was passionate about. I wanted to create more than just a product. I wanted to create a community. I started organizing events and collaborating with gamers, developers, and influencers in the industry to create a brand that felt authentic. The controller was just the beginning. Today, the business has grown beyond my wildest expectations. We offer a range of customizable products, from controllers to gaming headsets, and our brand has become a staple in the gaming community. We've expanded into international markets, and I've had the privilege of working with some incredible people who share the same vision and passion for gaming. And while I still can't believe how far we've come, I'm more excited than ever about where we're headed. Looking back, I realized that the key to success wasn't just having a good idea, it was having the perseverance to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. Every failure, every setback, was just another lesson. And as cheesy as it sounds, it's true, persistence and passion can turn an idea into a thriving business. I'm not some tech genius or prodigy. I'm just a guy who was tired of the traditional career path and wanted to try something different. And if I can do it, I know anyone can. If you have an idea, no matter how small or crazy it may seem, go for it. Start somewhere. Take the leap, and don't look back. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. This is the story of how I went from sleeping on a friend's couch with less than $50 to my name to building a multi-million-dollar business. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but I learned a lot about perseverance, grit, and what it really means to be an entrepreneur. Back in 2012, I was 22 and had just finished a degree in communications. The problem was, I didn't have a job, and I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with my life. I lived in a small town where the job market was terrible, and I didn't have the luxury of connections or a safety net. I had just broken up with my girlfriend, and my parents weren't in a position to help me financially. That left me with no choice but to crash at my best friend Mike's place, where I slept on his couch for a few months. Mike had been my friend since high school, and he was kind enough to let me stay for as long as I needed, but I knew I couldn't keep mooching off him forever. One night, while scrolling through Reddit, something I did to kill time, I stumbled across a post about a guy who had started his own digital marketing agency. The more I read about it, the more I thought to myself, hey, I can do this. I didn't have a background in business or marketing, but I was a quick learner, and I had always been a bit of a hustler. I'd always had a knack for understanding how social media and online platforms worked. I'd built a decent following on Twitter and Instagram just by sharing my thoughts and jokes. It was clear to me that the digital space was booming, and businesses were starting to realize the importance of online presence. The next day, I spent hours researching everything I could about digital marketing. I read blogs, watched YouTube tutorials, and even listened to podcasts. I didn't have much money, but I knew I had to invest in learning this skill set if I wanted to make it out of my situation. Around the same time, I noticed a few small local businesses near where I was staying were struggling to get their names out there. I figured this was my chance. I reached out to several of these businesses and offered to help them grow their online presence in exchange for a small fee. I didn't have any portfolio or proven results to show them, but I was upfront about my experience and offered to work for a fraction of what other agencies would charge. The first business to take me up on my offer was a local coffee shop. They'd never used social media to market before, and they had no idea where to start. I told them I would set up their Facebook page, create content for them, and run targeted ads to increase foot traffic to their store. I spent the next couple of weeks working on the project. I took some pictures of their coffee and pastries, created engaging posts, and set up a few paid campaigns on Facebook. I tracked everything meticulously and made small tweaks along the way. Within a month, they started seeing more customers, and their sales increased. I was stoked. I went back to the coffee shop owner and showed him the results. He was impressed, and even though I was still very new to the game, he recommended me to a couple of his friends who owned businesses. Word of mouth was starting to work in my favor. I began taking on more clients, learning as I went. Every time I landed a new project, I gave it my all. There were times when I was working 16-hour days, and I didn't see any money for weeks. But I knew this was my shot, and I wasn't going to blow it. I had my first big break when I landed a contract with a small gym that was looking to expand. They wanted to build a presence on Instagram and get more clients through their doors. I spent weeks optimizing their social media accounts, shooting video content for Instagram stories, and running a high-converting Facebook ad campaign. After just a few weeks, the gym's membership signups increased by 40%, and they were thrilled with the results. This success led to more referrals, and I started getting larger clients. I was working from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., barely eating or sleeping, but it didn't matter. The hustle was paying off. After about a year, I was able to hire a few contractors to help with the workload, and that's when things really started to take off. In 2014, I officially registered my business, an online marketing agency that specialized in social media management and digital advertising. By then, I had about 10 clients, a small team, and a growing reputation. I moved out of Mike's apartment and into my own place. It was a modest studio, but it was mine, and it felt like a huge win. But here's where the story gets interesting. By 2015, I had scaled my business to the point where I was generating a steady stream of income, but I was still working long hours and constantly putting out fires. I realized that I needed to build something more sustainable. I had learned that client work was exhausting, and I had no time to focus on growing the business itself. I also noticed that some of my competitors were offering courses and digital products to supplement their service offerings. I decided to pivot. Instead of just offering services, I started creating digital marketing courses. I packaged my knowledge into online content that I could sell to a wider audience. I started offering webinars, ebooks, and instructional videos on how businesses could market themselves online. The first product I launched was a $99 course on social media advertising. I sold it to my existing clients and on social media platforms. To my surprise, it sold like crazy. Over the next few years, I continued developing new products, offering one-on-one consulting, and expanding my reach. I also started a blog and grew my email list. Slowly but surely, I began transitioning from a service-based business to an educational platform. By 2018, my agency was generating over $1 million in revenue. But more importantly, I had established a brand that was recognized in the industry. I was invited to speak at conferences, my products were selling consistently, and my team had grown to over 20 employees. I finally felt like I had built something meaningful. Now, in 2025, my company is a full-fledged digital marketing powerhouse. We run campaigns for global brands, create online courses that help entrepreneurs, and offer software tools for digital marketers. Our revenue has far exceeded what I ever imagined, and I've been able to invest in other businesses, start charitable initiatives, and travel the world. Looking back, the road was anything but smooth. There were days I questioned whether I was on the right path, times when I wanted to give up, and moments when failure seemed inevitable. But the one thing that kept me going was the belief that if I kept pushing forward, I would eventually break through. And I did. Entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. It requires a level of perseverance and self-discipline that most people don't understand. But if you're willing to take risks, learn from mistakes, and keep hustling, the rewards can be incredible. To anyone reading this who's stuck in a rough situation, feeling like they have no way out, I've been there. Don't give up. There's a way out if you're willing to put in the work. I promise you it's worth it. I was 24 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in business administration, when I realized I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I had landed a decent job at a corporate office, making just enough to cover rent and student loans, but every day felt like I was walking through a fog. I had this burning desire to do something more, something that didn't involve a cubicle or endless meetings about things that didn't matter. One Friday afternoon, as I sat in my office scrolling through social media, I came across an ad for an online course on e-commerce. It was a how-to guide for starting an online business, and the price was ridiculously low. I knew it was one of those things you often see on the internet, but something about it felt different. Maybe it was because I was tired of my routine, or maybe I was just desperate for change, but I clicked on the link. The course promised to teach everything I needed to know to start an online store, from finding a niche to driving traffic to my website. I'd always been fascinated by the idea of creating something from scratch, and I knew this was my shot at breaking free from the grind of corporate life. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends or family. It felt a little embarrassing to be thinking about starting an online store, but I couldn't shake the thought. The next weekend, I dove into the course. The first module was about picking a niche, and I remember spending hours staring at the screen, trying to figure out what kind of product I could sell. I wasn't interested in selling things I didn't care about. I didn't want to start another store selling generic phone cases or cheap jewelry. I wanted something with purpose, something that I could stand behind. After a few days of brainstorming, I finally landed on an idea. I would sell eco-friendly products. There was a growing trend towards sustainability, and I saw an opportunity to create a business that aligned with my values. I could sell reusable straws, biodegradable phone cases, and eco-friendly cleaning supplies. My plan was simple: offer products that would help people reduce their carbon footprint and live more sustainably. But here's where the first challenge hit. I didn't have a single clue about where to source these products. I spent days researching manufacturers, suppliers, and wholesalers. It felt like I was hitting dead ends at every turn. I didn't want to buy products from China or mass-market suppliers. I wanted to find something unique. After weeks of searching, I finally stumbled upon a small supplier in my own country who produced high-quality, eco-friendly products. I negotiated a deal and placed my first order. I launched the website with just a handful of products. I didn't expect much at first, but I was proud of what I'd built. The website looked decent, and I spent hours crafting a brand message that reflected my commitment to sustainability. I was feeling good about my decision, even if it was just a small side project for now. The first few weeks were brutal. I made almost no sales. I'd sit by my phone, refreshing the order page, waiting for that first cha-ching notification. I followed all the advice I had learned in the course. I posted on social media, ran ads, and optimized my website for SEO. But nothing seemed to work. I was starting to lose hope. Then, I made a mistake. I was so focused on getting my products in front of people that I hadn't taken the time to connect with my audience. I wasn't telling my story or explaining why I started this business in the first place. So, I decided to share my journey on social media, my struggle to find eco-friendly products, my desire to create a brand that people could trust, and my personal commitment to sustainability. I didn't just want to sell products. I wanted to build a community. It worked. Slowly but surely, people started reaching out. They asked questions about the products, shared their own stories of trying to live more sustainably, and began placing orders. The more authentic I became in my messaging, the more engaged my audience became. And as my brand grew, so did my sales. After 6 months, I was making enough money to quit my job. It was terrifying, but I knew I had to take the leap. I was fully committed now. I upgraded my website, started reaching out to influencers, and focused on building relationships with my customers. I also began expanding my product line, adding items like reusable grocery bags and zero-waste kits. The business was growing, but it wasn't without challenges. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, like I was in over my head. I was handling everything: customer service, inventory, marketing, finances, and it felt like I couldn't keep up. I had no experience running a business, and I was learning as I went. But I never gave up. I kept pushing forward, making mistakes, and learning from them. A year into the business, I received an email from a well-known eco-friendly influencer who wanted to collaborate. I was floored. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I worked closely with them to create a product bundle that would be featured on their platform, and within days, sales skyrocketed. That collaboration alone helped me reach a whole new audience. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I've since hired a small team to help manage operations, and we've expanded into international markets. My eco-friendly business has become a full-fledged company with multiple employees and a loyal customer base. I've learned more about entrepreneurship in the past few years than I ever did in college. But the most rewarding part of all of this? It's not the revenue or the recognition. It's the messages I receive from customers who tell me how much our products have helped them live more sustainably. I've built a business that aligns with my values, and every time I get a message like that, it reminds me why I started this journey in the first place. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: starting a business is hard. It's not glamorous, and it's not always easy. But if you're willing to put in the work, be authentic, and never give up, you can make it. My business has changed my life in ways I never imagined, and I hope my story can inspire someone else to take the leap, no matter how uncertain or scary it might feel at first. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. It was the summer of 2017 when I, a 28-year-old with no experience in business, found myself sitting in the back of a cramped apartment, sipping stale coffee, and brainstorming ideas that could possibly change my life. For years, I had worked dead-end jobs, from waiting tables to washing cars, all while dreaming of starting something on my own. But all I had to show for it was a mountain of debt, an unfulfilled desire to break free from the cycle, and a sense of uncertainty about where to even begin. Everything changed one evening, almost by accident. I was scrolling through social media when an advertisement for a drop shipping course popped up. It promised to teach how to run an online store with no inventory and no upfront investment, a solution that seemed too good to be true. The ad claimed that this was the ultimate side hustle that could generate hundreds or even thousands of dollars a day. My initial reaction was skepticism, of course, but the more I researched, the more it seemed like a legitimate opportunity. I had heard of drop shipping before, but had always dismissed it as a scam or a get-rich-quick scheme. But this time, something clicked. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I clicked on the ad, bought the course, and told myself, this is it. This is my shot. The course was a series of pre-recorded videos, tutorials, and guides on how to find profitable products, set up an online store, and market it effectively. It seemed straightforward enough. You pick a niche, find suppliers who will ship products directly to your customers, and use online ads to generate sales. Simple, right? Well, as I soon learned, nothing is ever simple when it comes to business. I spent the next several weeks furiously working on my drop shipping store, learning how to create a website on Shopify. Choosing a product, I settled on phone accessories, something simple and inexpensive, and setting up Facebook ads. I was working late nights after my day job, constantly tweaking and adjusting, convinced that success was just around the corner. But nothing happened. For months, I had little to no sales. My Facebook ads were barely generating any clicks, let alone purchases. I tried everything. I reworked my website, changed product descriptions, and spent more money on ads, all while growing more frustrated. It felt like I was throwing money into a black hole. At some point, I reached a breaking point. My savings were drained, and I was starting to question my decision to even pursue this. I was on the verge of giving up when I had an epiphany. Maybe I wasn't targeting the right audience. My ads were too broad, my website too generic. I had chosen the phone accessory niche because it seemed easy, but I hadn't considered what people truly wanted. So, I took a step back and reevaluated everything. I decided to pivot. Instead of selling random phone accessories, I focused on one specific product that had the potential to go viral: phone camera lenses. This was 2018, and social media influencers were all the rage. I figured if I could target people who wanted to take better photos with their phones, I could create a niche audience that would be more likely to buy. I updated my website, changed the branding, and redesigned my ads to focus on influencers and amateur photographers who were looking for ways to improve their mobile photography. It wasn't an overnight success, but within a month, I started seeing results. Sales trickled in, then snowballed. I had found my target market. I got more serious about my advertising, investing in better campaigns, and even reached out to influencers who would promote my products. Slowly but surely, my revenue grew. I was still working my full-time job at a retail store, but now I had something on the side that was finally taking off. By the end of 2018, I had made enough money to quit my job and focus entirely on my online store. The next few years were a whirlwind. I hired a small team to help with customer service, order fulfillment, and marketing. I learned how to scale my business and eventually expanded into new product lines. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were hiccups along the way, from product shortages to customer complaints. But each challenge taught me something valuable. I became better at managing inventory, optimizing my website, and dealing with suppliers. I even branched out into creating my own brand of phone accessories, which helped differentiate me from other drop shippers in the market. Fast forward to 2021. I had turned my small drop shipping venture into a full-fledged e-commerce business with multiple product lines, a loyal customer base, and six-figure revenue. I was living in a nice apartment in a city I once dreamed of living in, with the freedom to travel whenever I wanted. But there was one thing I had never anticipated: the pressure to continue growing. By then, my business had gained so much attention that I started getting offers from venture capitalists and investors who wanted to buy a stake in my company. The idea of selling my business was tempting. I had worked so hard, and now I could finally reap the rewards. But deep down, I knew that my journey wasn't over yet. I had put everything I had into building my brand, and the thought of giving it up didn't sit well with me. I wasn't ready to let go of my creation just yet. I decided to continue growing my business independently. I started diversifying my product range even further and focused on building an even stronger relationship with my customers. The key, I realized, wasn't just about making money. It was about creating a brand that people could trust and feel connected to. I invested in better customer service, faster shipping, and unique designs that resonated with my audience. In 2023, my company became one of the leading names in the mobile accessory industry. I had gone from being a broke, frustrated individual with no experience to running a successful e-commerce empire. It wasn't just the money or the recognition that made it all worth it. It was the knowledge that I had built something from scratch, a dream that once seemed impossible. The moral of the story? Never give up and never settle for the easy way out. Success isn't an overnight thing. It takes perseverance, adaptability, and a willingness to learn from your failures. Most importantly, it takes believing in yourself and your vision, even when the odds seem stacked against you. I may not have the secret formula for success, but I can tell you this: hard work, persistence, and a bit of risk-taking can take you places you never thought possible. And if you're willing to put in the effort, who knows? You could be the next success story. I used to be just like any other broke college graduate. I had dreams, sure, but they were just dreams. At the time, I had no idea how to turn them into something real. But let me tell you how one seemingly random decision ended up completely changing my life. I graduated with a degree in marketing. The job market was tough back in 2015, especially for someone with no real-world experience. I had a few interviews that went nowhere, and after about 6 months of nothing, I was getting desperate. I had about $500 left in my savings, and I was living with my parents. It felt like I was stuck in limbo. Then one evening, I was scrolling through social media, as usual, and I saw a post from an old high school friend who had recently started a small e-commerce business. It caught my eye. The post was simple, something like, "Just launched my first product. Wish me luck." The comments were filled with people wishing him success, and one of the comments stood out: "How did you even get started?" I clicked on his profile, went through a few of his posts, and noticed he had made a small fortune with his online store. He wasn't exactly a millionaire, but he was making enough to quit his day job and live comfortably. That was a wake-up call for me. I had always been intrigued by the idea of e-commerce, but I didn't think it was something someone like me could do. I never had any technical skills, nor did I have thousands of dollars to invest. But after seeing my friend's success, I started to wonder, what if I could do something similar? So, I started researching. I spent the next week watching YouTube videos and reading blogs about dropshipping, creating online stores, and finding winning products. I felt like I had stumbled upon a hidden world that was just waiting to be tapped into. The more I learned, the more excited I became. This could be it. This could be my way out of the rut. I knew I had to start small, so I set a budget of $300. The first step was to create a website. I used Shopify to build a simple store. The design was nothing fancy, but it worked. My product? A reusable water bottle with a built-in fruit infuser. I found a supplier on AliExpress who was selling them for $6 each, and I listed them on my site for $20. After spending a couple of days setting everything up, product pages, ads, social media profiles, I launched my store. I didn't expect much at first. I knew it would take time to gain traction, but I was determined to keep going. I ran Facebook ads with a daily budget of $10. I I targeted fitness enthusiasts and people who were into sustainability. Honestly, I was just throwing things at the wall to see what would stick. For the first few weeks, nothing happened. No sales. My Facebook ads were getting clicks, but no one was buying. I was close to giving up. That's when I got a message on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize. They were asking about the water bottle. I responded quickly, and after a bit of back and forth, they made a purchase. One sale. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I felt a rush of excitement. It was proof that it was possible. That was the turning point for me. I decided to double down. I learned more about Facebook ads, tweaking my targeting and creative. I created better ad copy and ran split tests to see which images and videos performed best. Slowly, sales started to trickle in. The key was consistency. I didn't quit when things weren't going my way. I learned from every failure and kept improving. By the end of my first month, I had made around $1,500 in sales. That was huge to me. I was making more than I had at my old minimum wage job, but I still had a long way to go. I realized I needed to scale up, so I reinvested every penny I made into ads, better inventory, and eventually more products. I expanded my store, adding different types of water bottles, fitness gear, and eco-friendly products. It wasn't smooth sailing from there. I faced many obstacles: supplier issues, returns, customer complaints, and shipping delays. But each problem was a lesson. I learned to be more organized, to communicate better with customers, and to fine-tune my marketing strategies. I didn't just want to make a quick buck. I wanted to build something sustainable. As the months went by, my store gained more and more attention. I started making $5,000, $10,000, then $20,000 a month. By the end of the first year, I had made over $150,000 in revenue. I was able to quit my part-time job and focus on my business full-time. I moved into my own apartment and, for the first time in a long while, felt proud of what I had accomplished. The journey wasn't easy, and I faced a lot of setbacks. There were times when I questioned whether I was cut out for entrepreneurship, but I kept pushing forward because I had no other choice. I was determined to make it work. Fast forward to today, and my business is still growing. I've expanded into multiple product categories and built a brand around sustainability and fitness. I've hired a small team, and we're now doing 6 figures in profit every year. The best part? I'm able to do something I'm passionate about while helping others live healthier, more sustainable lives. It's crazy to think that one random Facebook post from a friend led me to where I am now. If you had told me back then that I'd be running a successful online business, I would have laughed. I never thought it was possible, but the truth is, if I can do it, anyone can. The key is not giving up. Don't let the setbacks discourage you. Learn from every mistake and keep improving. Success doesn't happen overnight, but if you stay focused and work hard, it will come. I'm not some self-made millionaire with a fancy lifestyle. I'm just a regular person who decided to take a chance and make something happen. And now, I get to wake up every day doing something I love. So if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, I encourage you to go for it. You don't need a huge budget or fancy skills. You just need the will to keep going when it gets tough. Trust me, it'll be worth it. I've been an entrepreneur for almost a decade, and I can confidently say that every part of this journey has been a roller coaster. But it all started from a place of desperation. I'm sharing this story because it may help someone out there who feels stuck or is considering taking the leap into business. Here's how I went from broke and out of work to building a successful e-commerce business that now earns 6 figures annually. It was 2016 when I hit rock bottom. I had just lost my job as a marketing manager at a mid-sized company due to some restructuring. At first, I thought it was a blessing in disguise. I'd always dreamed of owning my own business, but the fear of failure kept me locked in a 9-to-5 routine. I had savings, a little cushion, and the idea that maybe this could be the time to take that leap. But the reality was far from that. I quickly burned through my savings looking for opportunities and investing in every get-rich-quick scheme I could find. To make matters worse, I was living in a small apartment in a city where the rent was sky-high, and every job interview I went to turned into a dead end. I had no direction, no mentor, and honestly, no clue what I was doing. That was when a friend of mine reached out. She was in a similar situation and had started an online clothing store, selling custom t-shirts and hoodies. I wasn't particularly interested in fashion, but I did love the idea of running a business from home, so I asked her more about it. She was surprisingly transparent about the process and opened up about how she'd spent months researching, learning, and failing before she hit her stride. Her success wasn't immediate, but it was consistent, and that intrigued me. I did some quick research and realized that the world of e-commerce, particularly dropshipping, was growing rapidly. The idea of selling products without holding inventory seemed perfect for someone with limited capital. I spent the next few weeks diving into every free tutorial I could find online. I read articles, watched YouTube videos, and joined Facebook groups where other budding entrepreneurs shared their experiences. I learned about Shopify, setting up an online store, and finding suppliers. I won't lie, it felt like drinking from a fire hose. There was so much information, and the learning curve was steep. But the more I immersed myself in the process, the more I became convinced that this could work. One thing I had learned early on was that success wasn't just about the product. It was about building a brand and connecting with people. I decided to take a unique approach. Instead of just creating random products, I wanted to focus on something I was genuinely passionate about: outdoor adventures. I'd always loved hiking and camping, and I thought it would be great to create a brand around it. It wasn't a huge market, but it was a passionate one, and that's what mattered. After weeks of designing my store and setting up my website, I launched my store with only a handful of products. I spent hours working on social media marketing, learning the ropes of Facebook and Instagram ads, and engaging with potential customers. I was ready to put it all out there, hoping for at least a few sales. The first month was brutal. I didn't make a single sale. I spent money on ads, worked on the content, and watched as my bank account slowly dwindled. I began questioning whether I had made a huge mistake. I remember one night sitting at my kitchen table, looking at my empty store and wondering what went wrong. Was I just wasting time? Was I not good enough? But something inside me clicked. I realized I was focused on the wrong things. I was so obsessed with making the sale that I wasn't focusing enough on my customers' needs. I hadn't built a community. I hadn't created the emotional connection that would make people want to buy from me. That's when I decided to change my approach. Instead of constantly pushing products, I started creating content that resonated with my target audience. I shared personal stories of my hiking trips, my favorite camping spots, and tips for outdoor adventures. I built a blog on my website where I wrote about my experiences and shared useful resources. I also engaged with people on social media, replying to comments and messages, and slowly started creating a sense of community. One day, out of nowhere, I received my first order. I was ecstatic. I had made a sale. It wasn't much, just a $20 purchase. But to me, it was proof that my hard work had paid off. That's when things started to shift. Slowly, I started getting more orders. I continued to refine my marketing, tweaking my ads, and using data to learn more about my audience. I started using email marketing to follow up with customers and offer them discounts, and my sales began to grow steadily. By the end of the first year, I had earned enough to cover my living expenses. I still wasn't making a fortune, but it was enough to give me hope. The next few years were a series of ups and downs. There were months when sales were booming and others when they crashed. I learned to adapt quickly, testing new marketing strategies, expanding my product line, and working on my website's SEO to attract organic traffic. But what really made the difference was investing in myself. I stopped trying to do everything on my own. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service and order fulfillment, which freed up my time to focus on marketing and scaling. I took courses on Facebook ads, SEO, and email marketing, constantly improving my skills. I also found a mentor, someone who had been in the game for years and could offer invaluable advice and guidance. By 2020, I had turned my business into a full-time venture. I was able to quit my part-time job and focus solely on my e-commerce brand. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. I remember the day when I looked at my business and realized that I had created something sustainable. It wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was my livelihood. Today, I run a successful e-commerce brand that generates 6 figures in revenue annually. We have a small team, and I get to work from home every day, doing what I love. I'm no longer worried about making ends meet or scrambling for my next paycheck. And while I've achieved success, I don't take it for granted. I know how quickly things can change, and I'm always working on new strategies to grow the business. Looking back, I realized that the journey was never about getting rich quick. It was about persistence, learning from my failures, and adapting to the challenges. The hardest part was believing in myself when things weren't going well, and trusting that the work I was putting in would eventually pay off. If you're thinking about starting your own business, take it from me, it won't be easy. There will be days when you'll want to quit, when you'll doubt your abilities, and when things seem impossible. But if you keep going, keep learning, and keep pushing forward, the results will come. Success doesn't happen overnight, but with time, patience, and hard work, it's within reach. I had always been the kind of person who loved the idea of starting my own business, but I never actually thought I had the guts to do it. I was working a 9-to-5 job in marketing, doing the usual corporate grind, responding to emails, sitting in endless meetings, and surviving off the occasional free coffee in the break room. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate my job, but I could never shake the feeling that I was meant to be doing something more, something of my own. For years, I had this idea for a service-based business floating in my mind. The concept was simple, a subscription service that delivered eco-friendly cleaning products to people's doorsteps. This was back in 2017, before sustainability was as trendy as it is now, and I thought, why not? The problem was, I was terrified. I was terrified of failure. I was terrified of the financial risk. I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to compete in an already saturated market. But I also couldn't stop thinking about it. One night, after another mundane day at work, I found myself sitting on my couch, scrolling through social media, when I came across an ad for an online course about entrepreneurship. It was just a basic, no-frills course, but it was everything I needed to hear at that moment. The course outlined simple steps to start a business from scratch. It didn't promise success overnight, but it gave me a roadmap, something tangible I could follow. I immediately signed up. The first few weeks of the course were exhilarating. The instructor was relatable, breaking down each step in a way that made it feel manageable. By the end of the course, I had a business plan written down, a rough idea of branding, and most importantly, a sense of purpose. I decided I was going to quit my job and launch my eco-friendly cleaning subscription service. Now, I should tell you, I had no savings to fall back on. I was living paycheck to paycheck, like so many others. But I had a credit card with a decent limit, and I decided to take the risk. I started by purchasing a small batch of eco-friendly cleaning products from a supplier. I figured I'd start small, test the market, and see if it had potential. The first problem came when I realized I had absolutely no idea how to run an e-commerce store. I spent hours, days even, learning how to build a website from scratch. I was using Shopify, which made things easier, but I was still learning the ropes of online marketing, SEO, and how to drive traffic to my site. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I barely slept, glued to my laptop, trying to get everything in place. After weeks of preparation, I finally launched. I remember hitting the publish button on my website and staring at the screen. There was no fanfare, no confetti, just a quiet sense of terror mixed with excitement. I had no customers. No one knew about me. I had no brand recognition, and the idea of competing with larger, more established companies felt overwhelming. But then, something unexpected happened. My first customer placed an order. I was ecstatic. It was a single, modest purchase, but to me, it was everything. I packaged the order myself, wrote a handwritten thank you note, and shipped it out with the kind of care I imagined would make them feel special. I posted about it on my social media, thanking my customer, and the response I got was better than I could have expected. People began following my business, asking questions, and reaching out to learn more. I still didn't have a huge following, but at least I was on the map now. The excitement I felt from that one customer was enough to push me to keep going. As the months went by, I had a few more orders trickle in. I spent every free moment working on the business, trying to perfect the products and marketing. I reached out to bloggers and influencers in the eco-friendly space, asking if they would review my products. Some said yes, others didn't respond, but one influencer gave me a shout-out on her Instagram. That's when things really started to change. Suddenly, I had more customers than I could handle. I wasn't prepared for the flood of orders. I had to figure out how to fulfill them on time, how to manage inventory, and how to keep up with customer service. I learned the hard way that you can't scale a business by just winging it. I hired a couple of part-time employees to help with packing orders, and I invested in a better inventory management system. The stress was overwhelming at times, but the momentum kept me going. I had quit my job and was working 70-plus hours a week, but it didn't feel like work because I was doing something I loved. I also started paying closer attention to the feedback I was getting from my customers. Some wanted more eco-friendly products, others wanted to switch up their subscription plans, and some wanted a more personalized experience. I listened to their feedback and made adjustments to the service. I started offering custom cleaning kits, allowing customers to pick and choose the products they wanted. I launched a referral program to reward my loyal customers for spreading the word. But despite the success, there were moments when I doubted everything. There were months where I barely made any profit. There were days when I felt like throwing in the towel and returning to my cushy corporate job. I remember sitting in my office one afternoon, crying because I was so stressed out. I had a large order coming in, a few product shipments delayed, and a customer who was upset about a faulty product. It felt like everything was falling apart. But that's when I had a realization. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. A few more years passed, and my business continued to grow. I expanded my product line, hired more employees, and started offering more educational content on sustainability and eco-friendly living. The company had grown into a full-fledged business with a solid customer base and even some small retail partnerships. We hit a milestone I never thought was possible. I was making more money than I had at my corporate job. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about building something that I could call my own, something that I had poured my heart and soul into. Today, I'm running a successful business with a team of people who are just as passionate about sustainability as I am. I've been able to scale in a way that feels sustainable, pun intended, and true to the mission of my company. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I never forget the first customer who gave me a chance. Without them, none of this would have been possible. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire journey, it's that you can't wait for the perfect moment to start. There's never going to be a perfect time, and there's always going to be something standing in your way. But if you just take that first step, no matter how small, the rest will follow. And if you're willing to put in the work and learn from your mistakes, anything is possible. I was 24 when I decided to quit my 9-to-5 job in an office and launch my own startup. It was the kind of decision that people always warned me against. I had a steady paycheck, benefits, and the comfort of knowing exactly what my day would look like when I woke up. But I hated it. The thought of sitting in front of a desk for the next 40 years, punching in and out, feeling like I was wasting my potential, it made me sick. So, one night, I sat down, created a plan, and gave myself the green light to dive into the unknown. At the time, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a recent college grad with a degree in business, but my experience with startups was limited to reading articles and listening to podcasts. Still, I was determined. I had an idea for a product that I thought could really solve a common problem in my community, finding reliable, affordable local services. It wasn't the most original idea, but it was something I was passionate about. And I figured that passion was what would set me apart. I used all the savings I had to build the prototype of the website and create a basic version of the platform. My idea was simple: a digital marketplace where people could book vetted service providers in their area. Whether it was a plumber, an electrician, or even a dog walker, the platform would ensure that users could find someone trustworthy. I knew this could work. I just had to get the word out. That was the first hurdle. I didn't have much of a budget for marketing. My friends and family told me I needed to hire experts, pay for ads, and make it all look polished from the get-go. But I didn't have the funds for that, so I went with the guerrilla approach. I started knocking on doors of local businesses, handing out flyers, and offering them free trials in exchange for feedback. I spent hours on the phone with potential customers, asking them questions about their service needs and what would make their lives easier. Slowly but surely, I built up a small but loyal group of early adopters. But despite all my hard work, the first few months were brutal. I wasn't making any money, and the frustration started to pile up. There were days I'd go home after a 12-hour shift at the startup and just cry. The isolation was the hardest part. I was working alone in my small apartment, trying to juggle everything from the marketing to the coding, customer support to the finances. No one really understood the weight of it, and I felt like I was constantly swimming upstream. Then came the tipping point. I had been stuck in a rut for weeks when I received an email from a venture capital firm asking for a meeting. It wasn't a cold email or a form letter. It was an actual inquiry, a real chance. My heart skipped a beat. This was the break I needed. The firm wanted to know more about my platform, my vision, and where I saw the company going. I spent the next few days preparing like my life depended on it, which, in many ways, it did. I stayed up late refining the pitch, rehearsing the numbers, and tweaking the platform. I knew this could be my shot, so I couldn't afford to screw it up. The meeting came. I was nervous as hell, but I pushed through it. I walked into their office, sat down with the investors, and explained my journey. I shared my story, told them about the struggles I had faced, and gave them a glimpse into the potential I saw in my startup. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then, one of the investors said something that completely threw me off. "I like your vision, but you know the real issue? You've been doing everything yourself. You need a team. You need to scale." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on doing everything alone that I hadn't considered the possibility of working with others to build the company. I had this weird pride about doing it all myself, but the reality was I wasn't going to get anywhere if I didn't start thinking bigger. The investors didn't sign me on the spot, but they gave me something even more valuable: mentorship. They introduced me to a few key people who could help me build a better product, improve my customer experience, and get more users on board. That was the turning point. From that day forward, I made it a point to network, to find people who could help me, and to let go of my need to do everything myself. Slowly, I brought on a small team. I hired a developer who could focus on the back end of the platform, a designer who could make it look more professional, and a marketing person who knew how to get the word out. With their expertise, things started to take off. We fine-tuned the platform, added new features, and created a seamless user experience. 1 year later, we were not only breaking even, but we were also starting to make a profit. The platform had gained traction, and users were actually starting to trust it. Local service providers were signing up, and we were getting solid reviews. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to show me that this could work. The next 2 years were a whirlwind. We raised a round of funding, expanded to new cities, and slowly started making our mark in the industry. It was hard, and there were plenty of times I questioned whether I had made the right choice. But every time I doubted myself, something would happen that would remind me why I had started in the first place. Finally, when I was 27, after years of hustling, we landed a deal with a major partner, a national company that saw the potential in our platform. The deal wasn't just about money, though. It gave us access to a much wider market and helped solidify our place in the industry. The phone call came one night, and I remember pacing around my apartment, trying to process what was happening. It felt surreal, like everything I had been working for had finally paid off. Today, my company is still growing, and we're now one of the leading players in the space. I still remember those early days of struggle, working long hours and feeling like I was never going to get anywhere. But I also remember how I pushed through those dark times, how I learned from my mistakes, and how I never gave up on the dream. I'll be honest, entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. It's hard, it's lonely, and it often feels like you're stuck in a never-ending grind. But there's also a thrill to it, a sense of fulfillment that comes from knowing you created something from nothing. And now, looking back on everything I've been through, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I had always been the kind of person who loved solving problems. It was an instinct, something that had been with me since childhood. I would spend hours dissecting toys, figuring out how they worked, and then trying to make them better. That obsession with improvement led me down a path that, at the time, I never imagined would turn into an entrepreneurial journey. It all started when I was 24, fresh out of college with a degree in mechanical engineering. I had a steady job at a mid-sized tech company, working as a product designer. The pay was decent, and I had a comfortable life, but something was missing. I felt stifled by the routine and longed to create something of my own, something that wasn't limited by someone else's vision. One day, while I was commuting home, I noticed something strange. People were carrying these massive, bulky power banks in their bags, trying to charge their phones on the go. It made sense, of course. Everyone was glued to their devices, and battery life was always a problem. But as I watched, I couldn't help but think that there had to be a better way. The idea began to take root. A portable charger that wasn't just small and powerful, but also sleek and stylish, something people would actually want to carry around, rather than hide in a bag. I knew the market was flooded with portable chargers, but most of them were either too heavy, too large, or too ugly. Why couldn't technology be both functional and beautiful? I spent the next few weeks sketching out designs in my free time. I read articles about battery technology, watched videos on circuit boards, and learned everything I could about what made a power bank effective. I quickly realized that creating a product wasn't just about putting together some wires and a case. It was about user experience. I wanted people to love using it. But of course, the challenges were enormous. First, I had to find a manufacturer who could produce my designs. I had no experience in sourcing materials or working with factories overseas, so I started cold emailing companies, hoping to get a response. Most of the time, I got no reply, and when I did hear back, the prices were far beyond what I could afford. It was incredibly frustrating. I had this idea, but every step of the process seemed like a mountain I couldn't climb. I even thought about giving up a few times. But there was something inside me that refused to let go of the idea. I wasn't ready to throw in the towel. In the middle of all this, I decided to take a risk. I put together a small prototype using off-the-shelf components and some basic materials. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I showed it to a few friends, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. They loved the concept, and some even offered to invest a small amount to help me get started. I used that initial funding to order my first small batch of custom parts and made a deal with a factory to start producing my power bank. It wasn't the smoothest process. There were numerous delays, quality control issues, and production problems along the way. But I learned to take it one step at a time. Every setback was just another challenge to solve. Eventually, after many months of sweat, stress, and sleepless nights, I had a working prototype. Next came the hardest part, marketing. I had no idea how to sell a product, let alone get it into the hands of people who would actually buy it. So, I did what I knew best. I started researching. I read books, watched webinars, and listened to podcasts about e-commerce and online marketing. I taught myself about SEO, social media ads, and email marketing. But it was still daunting. How was I supposed to compete with massive companies that had millions of dollars to spend on advertising? I decided to start small. I set up a simple website and began promoting my product on social media. I made posts about the development process, shared behind-the-scenes footage, and offered discounts to early adopters. Slowly but surely, people started to take notice. Sales trickled in, and with each order, my confidence grew. It was working, but it was still a struggle. I was working a full-time job while trying to run a business, and there were countless late nights where I thought about quitting. But then something happened that changed everything. One of my Instagram posts caught the attention of a popular tech influencer who had over 1 million followers. She loved the design of the power bank and featured it in one of her posts. The result was a flood of traffic to my website. I had never seen anything like it before. Orders were coming in faster than I could process them. I couldn't believe my eyes. Suddenly, I was facing a new set of challenges, managing inventory, handling customer service, and scaling up production to meet demand. It felt like I was in over my head, but I refused to let the opportunity slip away. I hired a couple of part-time employees to help with logistics and customer support, and I continued to work with my manufacturers to improve the product and keep up with demand. As the months passed, my business grew steadily. I reinvested every penny I made into expanding my brand. I developed new products to complement the power bank, like wireless charging mats and phone cases. I also worked on creating a premium version of the power bank, one with more features and a more luxurious design. Eventually, I quit my day job. It was a huge leap of faith, but by then, my company was making enough money to support me full-time. The satisfaction of working for myself on my terms was indescribable. I wasn't just building a business, I was building something that people genuinely loved. Looking back, it feels like everything fell into place in a way that was almost serendipitous. There were so many moments where it seemed like failure was inevitable, but those were the moments that taught me the most. I learned to be patient, persistent, and resourceful. The hardest challenges ended up being the most rewarding. Now, for years later, my company is doing better than I ever could have imagined. We've expanded internationally, and our products are sold in several major retail chains. We've built a loyal community of customers who not only use our products but also believe in the values we stand for: innovation, sustainability, and design. And it all started with one small idea on a commute home. I won't lie and say that the journey has been easy. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments of self-doubt, and failures along the way. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. The key, I think, is simple. Find something you believe in, keep pushing forward even when things get tough, and don't be afraid to take risks. Success doesn't come from being perfect, it comes from perseverance and growth. In the end, the most valuable lesson I learned was that you don't need a massive budget or years of experience to start a successful business. You just need a great idea, a willingness to learn, and the courage to fail. I've been an entrepreneur for nearly a decade now, but the road hasn't always been smooth. In fact, my story starts with a series of failures, a ton of uncertainty, and a massive amount of self-doubt. I'm not here to give you some perfect fairy tale, but rather to share the raw, real journey that led to where I am now. It all began in my college years. I wasn't one of those students who immediately knew what they wanted to do. I tried a few different majors, hoping to stumble upon my passion. Eventually, I landed on business, but honestly, I was just trying to graduate. I figured a business degree would offer me the flexibility to do just about anything in the future. But as time went on, I found myself disillusioned. The safe path was never something that spoke to me. I always had this urge to create, to build something on my own. In my senior year, I made a decision. I wouldn't be just another office worker. I would start something, anything, just to get my hands dirty in the real world of business. My big idea came to me when I noticed a gap in the market. There were a ton of boutique fitness studios opening up, but I noticed they all had the same problem. Scheduling was a mess, and there was no easy way for people to book classes. I had no idea how to code, but I thought, I'll build an app that solves this. At first, everything seemed possible. I spent weeks researching how to build an app, watching YouTube tutorials and reading blog posts. I didn't have a technical co-founder, and I wasn't prepared to pay someone a large sum of money for something I didn't fully understand. I even convinced a couple of my friends to join the venture. They were excited, and so was I. We all quit our day jobs, and in one case, college, to chase the dream. Fast forward 6 months, and reality hit us hard. We managed to scrape together a version of the app, but it was full of bugs, incomplete features, and worst of all, the idea didn't seem to resonate with users. We spent way too much time talking about the product and not enough time talking to potential customers. We quickly realized that fitness studio owners didn't have the problem we thought they did, and customers were not willing to pay for something they didn't really need. It felt like a huge failure, but we had already invested so much time, energy, and money into it. We didn't want to quit, but we also knew that we had to cut our losses before things got worse. The app was eventually shut down, and we all went our separate ways. I returned to a job I had before the startup, feeling like a total failure. It was tough to deal with, but I learned a valuable lesson. Just because you have an idea doesn't mean it will work. After about a year, I decided to try again. This time, I wasn't going to dive into something without proper research. I took the lessons from my first attempt and spent months interviewing potential customers, learning about their pain points, and validating ideas before even starting. That's when I came across a new problem, one I knew I could solve. A huge number of small businesses were struggling to create engaging marketing campaigns on social media. They didn't have the resources, time, or know how to do it effectively. I knew I could help them by providing an easy-to-use platform for creating high-quality social media content. I spent several months sketching out the platform, outlining features, and reaching out to friends who had expertise in design and development. This time, I was determined not to make the same mistakes again. I found a freelance developer and hired a designer to help bring the concept to life. It wasn't cheap, but I knew I had to invest if I wanted to make it work. After a few months of work, we had a prototype. We were still testing the waters, so we started with a small group of beta testers. The feedback was better than I could have ever imagined. People loved the simplicity and functionality of the platform. However, we were still a long way from making it profitable. I had no funding, and we were burning through the money I had saved. I remember at one point, I had to put a stop to everything for a few weeks because we didn't have enough to pay the developers' fees. That moment felt like the end of the road. But I didn't give up. Instead of giving in to the overwhelming stress, I reached out to a few friends in the industry for advice. One of them suggested I pitch the idea to a potential investor. At the time, I was hesitant. The thought of getting external funding felt like a huge leap, and the whole process seemed so intimidating. But after some convincing, I put together a pitch deck and reached out to local investors. To my surprise, I found someone willing to take a chance on me. With a small seed investment, I was able to get the platform off the ground. Over the next few months, we fine-tuned the platform, added more features, and started bringing in users. Slowly but surely, we started seeing traction. Our user base grew, and as more businesses came on board, we were able to refine our offering even further. Still, there were many moments where I felt like we were on the edge of failure. At one point, we hit a plateau, and revenue stagnated. We were growing, but it was slower than I had hoped. It wasn't until I started paying attention to customer retention that things truly took off. By focusing on improving the user experience, implementing feedback, and delivering more value, we created loyal customers who not only paid for the service but also spread the word. Fast forward a few more years, and my platform is now generating significant revenue. I went from struggling to make ends meet to being able to hire a team and scale up the business. The road was anything but easy, and I still deal with challenges on a daily basis, but I've learned to embrace them. I've learned that the most important thing is to keep going, even when it feels like you've hit a dead end. Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, and the lows are just as important as the highs. There are moments when I look back and think, how did I get here? There were times when I almost gave up, but those are the times that taught me the most. It wasn't the product or the idea that made the difference. It was the perseverance to keep pushing forward when everything seemed hopeless. Now, I mentor other aspiring entrepreneurs and often hear the same story of failure and frustration. My advice to them is always the same. Learn from your mistakes, keep testing your ideas, and don't be afraid to pivot. Entrepreneurship isn't about finding the perfect idea from the start. It's about learning, iterating, and growing from the journey. You'll never know if something works unless you take the leap. I'm not the first person to tell this story, but I'll tell it again. Failure is part of the process. Embrace it, learn from it, and keep moving forward. If you do, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I was 23, freshly out of college, and on the brink of launching my first real business. Like many in my shoes, I had big dreams, a huge vision, and, most importantly, zero experience. I had spent 4 years studying business in school, but textbooks and case studies didn't exactly teach me how to survive in the real world. It all started on a random Thursday when I was sitting in a coffee shop, sipping on a mediocre cappuccino, scrolling through social media. I had just quit my first real job at a small marketing agency, where I had been working for about a year. The decision came after an agonizing 3 months of dissatisfaction, poor pay, limited growth opportunities, and an atmosphere that felt more like a high school cafeteria than a professional workplace. I knew I needed to get out, but I didn't have a solid backup plan. As I scrolled, I saw an ad on Instagram for a revolutionary new app. It claimed to help people manage their finances in a smarter way. I clicked on it out of curiosity, and within minutes, I was reading about how this app could analyze spending habits and suggest budgeting strategies based on your transaction history. It seemed like an excellent tool, and the user interface was clean and intuitive. But as I thought more about it, I realized that it wasn't quite there yet. I had my own struggles with managing money, even with a decent salary, and I knew other people were in the same boat. But what struck me was how complicated personal finance could be. If you weren't an expert, trying to follow some of these apps felt like learning a new language. I thought, why isn't there an app that helps people save, invest, and manage money in one place, without all the jargon and complexity? In that moment, an idea was born. It wasn't just another finance app. It was a platform that would simplify money management, integrating budgeting, saving, and investing into one easy-to-use app for everyday people. I immediately became obsessed with this idea. But then, the cold reality hit me. I had no technical skills, no investors, and no experience in app development. But here's the thing about youth and inexperience. You're too naive to understand just how impossible things are, which sometimes works in your favor. So, I started researching. I spent hours reading up on app development, business models, and user experience. I started reaching out to anyone and everyone in my network who might know something about tech or finance. One of my college friends had a cousin who was a developer, and after a few weeks of awkward phone calls and emails, I convinced him to work on the app with me. He was skeptical at first, but I sold him on the vision, and we agreed to meet up and sketch out a plan. We didn't have much money between us, so we decided to build the app ourselves. He worked on the back end, while I tackled everything else: marketing, customer acquisition, and the design. To say that we were clueless would be an understatement. I remember spending countless nights in my apartment with a whiteboard, scribbling down ideas and trying to figure out how we could turn our rough concept into something real. I watched hundreds of YouTube tutorials on design and development and attempted to learn everything I could about what it took to build a product from scratch. But just as things started to look like they might come together, we hit our first major obstacle. The app crashed constantly during early testing. The back end was slow, the design was clunky, and we had no idea how to fix it. I remember feeling like the whole thing was falling apart before it had even started. I almost gave up several times. But somehow, I kept going. I wasn't going to quit now. At this point, I realized that I had to stop pretending to know everything and start asking for help. So, I reached out to a few mentors, successful entrepreneurs and tech veterans, and shared my progress with them. To my surprise, most of them were more than willing to help. They gave me advice on how to fine-tune the product, where to look for funding, and how to better approach marketing. With their feedback, we managed to fix many of the issues. The app became more stable, and after 6 months of sleepless nights, we were ready to launch. We didn't have a big marketing budget, so we decided to go all in on social media and content marketing. I started writing blog posts about personal finance, creating simple infographics, and sharing my journey of building the app. I also leveraged my personal network to spread the word. Slowly, but surely, we started gaining users. The first few months were brutal. Our user base grew, but the app still had bugs, and the feedback we received was overwhelmingly critical. People loved the concept but complained about performance issues. They wanted more features, better customer support, and faster response times. We were juggling 100 different things at once, and there were days when I honestly thought I'd made a huge mistake. But we pressed on. By month 5, we managed to secure a small round of seed funding from an angel investor. It wasn't much, but it was enough to hire a small team and fix the most pressing problems with the app. We also improved our marketing strategy and started focusing on influencer partnerships, which helped us grow our user base exponentially. It wasn't long before we were receiving positive reviews from users who appreciated the simplicity and functionality of our platform. By the time our first year came to a close, we had over 100,000 active users and had secured additional funding to scale. We were no longer struggling to keep the app afloat. But, of course, new challenges arose. Now, we had to figure out how to keep growing, stay competitive, and build a sustainable business model. The journey was far from over, but looking back at where we started, it felt like a small victory. Today, our app is one of the top-rated personal finance platforms in the market. We've expanded our team, added more features, and brought on a diverse group of investors. But for me, the real victory is knowing that we built something from nothing. We turned an idea that seemed impossible into something that millions of people use every day. And, just as important, we learned the value of perseverance, adaptability, and asking for help when you need it. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, I've got one piece of advice. Don't wait until you have everything figured out. You'll never have it all figured out. But if you have the passion, the drive, and the willingness to learn, you can make it happen. Keep pushing forward, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. Success doesn't come overnight, but every step you take gets you closer. We're still growing, and the road ahead is long, but I wouldn't trade this experience for anything. What started as an idea in a coffee shop has turned into something that has impacted so many people's lives, and that's something I'm incredibly proud of. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.